Are you suggesting to me that either this school or any other school round here would live its normal course if we all believe that men outside of Jesus Christ are going to perish forever and ever and ever? When they made appeals, he pulled out a checkbook. He's very generous, a soft touch, as you say. He'd give to missions, he'd give to other things. But he died unsaved. He had a fine service. The preacher told lies over him, as they often do when they bury people. And he wakes up in hell, and he looks there into eternity, and there's his precious wife he's scorned and ridiculed and laughed at, and she's at the marriage supper of the Lamb, and he's going to burn forever and ever. That's what the Word of God says. He sees in the bosom of Abraham, he sees Lazarus there. When I think of this book, I think of three things. To me, the book of Revelation is a book of majesty, it's a book of mystery, and it's a book of misery. Because it tells me about the end of time, and it tells me about beyond the end of time. And I saw a great white throne and him that sat upon it, from whose face the heavens and the earth fled away. Paul says we all of us are going to the judgment seat of Christ. This is not the judgment seat of Christ. This is the judgment seat of God. In this 20th chapter. From his face the heavens and the earth fled away, and there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God. And the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which are written in the books according to their works. The sea gave up the dead which were in it. Death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them. They were judged every man according to their works. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. I opened my Bible at this chapter. I began to read it. I've read it often, maybe thousands of times over the years. But as I read this, suddenly it seemed as though I felt like a man going down the road and he gets ambushed. There's somebody behind the bush and they grab hold of him and just make him look and listen. When did you last hear a sermon on TV about hell? About everlasting destruction? It's not fashionable. It doesn't bring the money in. It doesn't tickle the ears. It tickles the conscience. Whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. I sat at my desk and the tears began to pour down my face. The Lord shot the name of a man into my mind. I've never seen the man in my life. I knew he used to be considerably wealthy. I don't know much about his name even. I know his son. I love his son very well. I began to think about that man with all his privileges in social life and everything, but his name is not in the book of life. And he's going to be participating in this second death. You bump into Jesus saying something that you hadn't noticed about, because 3 times in the Beatitudes it mentions hell. But we stress all the beautiful things about the Beatitudes. There was a certain man which was clothed in purple and fine linen, and he fed sumptuously or extravagantly every day. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which laid at his gate full of sores. Now notice there are two beggars in this story. One begs in time and the other begs in eternity. The other is begging at the gates, hoping he can get a few crumbs. But you find a little later, in verse 24, that this man cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me. He's begging. Have mercy, have mercy. This shatters forever the idea you can pray to saints. This man prayed at the wrong time to the wrong person for the wrong thing, and he got the wrong answer. It came to pass that the beggar died, and what? He was carried. The rich man died and was buried. Now which is best to be carried or to be buried? This man is in torment. You've heard me say more than once, I'm going to heaven, and I'm not going for the weekend. Hell has no exits. Jesus says, hell hath enlarged her mouth. Notice what it says carefully here. In hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torments, and he seeth. He seeth. You know, people in hell can see. I believe one of the perpetual torments, remember it's not going to pass in a weekend. I believe everybody goes to hell, they'll see everything that's going on in heaven. So he's very conscious. You know, some people try to say, well, there isn't such a thing as hell. A few minutes after the man gets angry, he says, go to hell. What's he saying? Go to nowhere? Jesus spoke about hell 10 times. He spoke about heaven only once. We need to recover our balance. I told you about a man that lived in a city that I lived in before I was born, by the name of Charlie Pease. He was the Al Capone of our nation. He raped, he robbed, he did every devilish thing. And the cops couldn't get him, but once they got him, he was sentenced to death in the city where I lived. And the judge said to him, "You'll hang by the neck until you die, and God have mercy on your soul." 7:15 in the morning, the judge came, the prison governor came in, the prison doctor came in, the hangman, who was Pierpoint, came in, and a preacher came to say a little prayer. Oh yes, he mentioned heaven, about streets of gold and angels and everything. Then he mentioned hell. Charlie Pease reached for the preacher and spun him round and said, "What are you reading?" Well, he said, "I'm reading from a book called The Consolations of Religion." Consolations? I'm not concerned about heaven. I'm not going. You just said a minute ago that hell is a bottomless pit. You said that hell is fire that never goes out. You said hell is a death that never dies. Do you mean that when I swing on that rope, something goes out of me away into what you call eternity, and my body goes down into that quicklime? But something gets out of me before I get down to the bottom. Are you telling me that I, Charlie Pease, will be eternally burning and never consumed, eternally dying and never die, eternally in the grip of death and never feel relief? I'm going to be in eternal agony forever and ever? I'm asking you, do you believe in a hell like that, where people never, ever die? Are you suggesting to me that either this school or any other school around here would live its normal course if we all believe that men outside of Jesus Christ are going to perish forever and ever and ever? Can you imagine a choir, a multitude which no man can number, and 144,000 in the orchestra, singing with rapturous delight and watching the bride come? Who is she? She's the bride of brides who's going to be married to the King of Kings. And there's a man mouldy in hell. And he's looking back and thinking how many times I laughed when my wife talked about that. How many times I heard a preacher, I thought it was too far out. I thought it was a kind of a fairy story. Everybody who goes to hell will be able to recite every word of every sermon they ever heard since they were a child. The agony of hell is there's no way out. The agony of hell is that we'll have the sharpest memories we ever had if we get there. In verse 23, you notice that he can see. In hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torments. Oh, that conscience he smothered now, it feels like a spark of hell itself inside of him. Verse 23 he can see. Verse 24 he can hear, because Abraham spoke to him. Verse 24, he cried and said, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus. He may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue." Look, that man's going to be chewing his own tongue for 1,000,000 years, and he'll see people sitting at the marriage supper of the Lamb drinking the wine of the ages. He has an appetite, but there's nothing to satisfy. All his life he lusted for women, and now he can't celebrate his lust. I tell you, if you go to hell, you'll recognize people. You see your preacher, you'll wish to God he'd come and preach to you once more. You'll hear your mother praying and wish to God you'd been sensible when she was praying. You remember every time your conscience began to tremble and you smothered it. You remember when the fear of God came on you, but the fear of man crowded out the fear of God. Come on now, hell is eternal. There's no escape. There's no way out. But no man has ever escaped the eternal judgment of God. Say what you like. Every true revival. I know we don't preach it today. We're smooth. We're careful. Everybody's teaching. Do you know why teaching? Because it doesn't get to your conscience. It doesn't disturb you. We want somebody to sit nice and be comfortable. Just talk to us. This man has spent all this time getting nothing. A marvelous thing that's mentioned where is it? Matthew 7, where they sit down with Abraham and Isaac and all the saints of all the ages. And he sees his wife with a glorified body. He sees her with resurrection life. He sees her with a majesty he never dreamed that he'd ever see her in. And here he is in his perpetual misery. And there's going to be no change for him. I'm tormented. tormented with my memory, tormented with the times I rejected God, tormented with the times He offered me some service and I didn't do it, tormented with my guilt. It's come alive now more than ever. I'm tormented in this flame. You remember every time the Spirit of God was tugging at his conscience and he said no. But he says, son, remember, remember, remember. In your lifetime you had your good things. You were privileged to live in a Christian country. You went to a good church. You had godly parents. Remember all the good things you had, and you treated them as though they were dust or dung. You can't have them back now. Son, remember. Remember the missed opportunities. Remember the times you denied the Holy Ghost the right to come further into your life. Remember every time conscience worked with the touch of God on it. Son, remember in your lifetime all the warnings, all the pleadings by men, pleading by God, pleadings by your relatives, pleadings by the preachers, and you turn them all away. And verse 21 says, not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name have cast out devils, and in thy name done many mighty things? Verse 23 says, then will I profess unto them, I never knew me, ye workers of iniquity. Depart from me. Remember the first word of Jesus was what? Come unto me. His last word is depart from me. And he's saying it to preachers, he's saying it to miracle workers. He's saying it to men that have bled money by the millions of dollars out of people. Great is thy faithfulness. Very lovely. When did you last tell God that on your belly by yourself? You look at his faithfulness. He didn't cut you off when you committed that horrible sin. He extended his mercy, he extended his peace, he extended his joy. You say, well, I believe in once saved, always saved. Well, tell me this in God's name. Do you believe in once lost, always lost? Once you get through the gates there into hell, it's forever and ever. Once lost, always lost. There's no mercy there. There's no grace there. There's no pity there. It's all agony. It's everything that's antagonistic to God. Do you ever sing a hymn, hidden in the hollow of his blessed hand, never foe can follow, never traitor stand? Do you really believe, or is it just a little theological thing stuffed in your head? Do you believe your life is hid with Christ in God? Are you suggesting to me that either this school or any other school round here would live its normal course if we all believe that men outside of Jesus Christ are going to perish forever and ever and ever? I pitied my father. He wasn't very well educated. But after I got educated, I envied my father. So simple, so pure, so passionate, so prayerful. I never saw a preacher weep. My daddy would get down and groan and weep and travail for lost men and women. See, we confuse knowledge with wisdom. Yeah. But knowledge isn't wisdom. You know, Christianity is not, N-O-T, not been weighed in the balances and found wanting. It's been tried, found difficult, and rejected. He wants your heart, he wants your mind, he wants your will, he wants your emotions. Every part of you to be filled with God. If you get uncomfortable after an hour's preaching, what in God's name are you going to do in the millennium or in eternity? I know we don't preach it today. We're smooth, we're careful. It's not fashionable. It doesn't bring the money in. It doesn't tickle the ears. It tickles the conscience. You know, there are no tears in heaven and there are no smiles in hell. There's no sorrow in heaven, there's no joy in hell. And because we've lost sight of the wholeness of God, we've lost sight of the sinfulness of men. In heaven they sing the song of Moses and of the Lamb. What do they sing in hell, I'll tell you. They sing the end of chapter 8 of Jeremiah. The harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we're not saved. It's called you to holiness, it's called you to purity, it's called you to kiss this world goodbye with all of its pleasure, its pomp and its pride, and embrace the cross and follow the Lamb whithersoever he goes. Do you know the curse of this day is trying to get quick results so we can send letters out and say, we've had a good crusade, we've been here, we've been there, and so many have been saved. That's balderdash. Said, by the grace of God we will never pluck unripe fruit. It's not a case of living in repentance, it's a case of living in brokenness. Yeah. The perpetual challenge to the believer is come down from the cross and save yourself. Why should you fast when other people are feasting? Why should you be down there breaking your heart, weeping for revival when other people are over there having a good time and living it up like they do in many of these places? I said to you last week, I said again, when are we going to get serious about being serious, about revival? If you hear of a revival, let me know. I'll be happy to go. You see, men who have got eternity on their eyeballs, as Jonathan Edwards had, men who have seen into the abyss of hell where their worm dieth not, the people who are there, they never die. It's a second death. Death is separation from God forever. The first death may be cruel, but the second death, when a man dies in agony of soul, it's something entirely different. I preached one night, I think it was Psalm 51. After a meeting, a man came up and said, "You remember me?" I said, "No." "You remember my wife, don't you?" "No." "You remember preaching in the Methodist church opposite the Abbey Theatre?" "Oh, yeah, it's down in Dublin." "Oh," he said, "I got so angry with you." When people get angry, I'm sure I've hit the bullseye. God's first argument with you, if you're a sinner, is not that you're bad; it's that you're dead. Yes. Jesus didn't come into the world to make bad men good. He came to the world to make dead men live. And as you say, Mr. Ravenhill, we pass from death to life. When a man was going to be crucified, you knew a few things about him. When he had a cross on his shoulder, he wasn't coming back. Immediately he got a cross on his shoulder, you knew this: he had no rights of his own. He belonged to government. If you take up your cross, the moment you take up your cross, you've no rights of your own, you've no choice of your own, you've no will of your own. It's all his, unless you're playing games with God. We saw the vanity of this world, the emptiness of this world. You see, all the so-called success of this world is only froth cast up by the sea. Have you ever seen the sea washing up and it makes froth? And that's about the durability of all that this world has. If you want it in Old Testament language, it's vanity of vanities. Let me tell you, as an old geezer that I am, there's not one thing in life worth having outside of Jesus Christ. Yeah. And if you really sing, "Thou, O Christ, art all I want," you got it made. If you really sing that hymn, "Beneath the cross of Jesus, I ask no other sunshine than the sunshine of thy face," you won't care if the world, the flesh, the devil, the in-laws, the outlaws, anybody else frowns on you. If you have the smile of God, what in the world do you care about the frown of men? You know what God's looking for? People who live recklessly for Him. Not concerned about public opinion. Not even about preachers' opinion. Becoming a love slave of Jesus Christ. Again I say, immediately you got that cross, you know that man was going out, he wasn't coming back. Jesus was severe. He said, "You can't, unless you leave all, not leave some things, leave all and follow me." This generation of Christians is responsible for this generation of lost people. You know the nearest mission field to you? Your front street.